Okay, so it appears that we're live already. That was sooner than expected.
That was
This
really
is
quick.
our, what, seventh, maybe? Our
Seven,
seventh
yeah,
broadcast
seven.
of two non-critics with Orange Retro Productions. I am non-critic Dustin, and all the way from Hawaii is
Non-critic Will, everybody. Aloha.
in his uniform today.
Yeah, I just got off work. Yeah.
So today we're talking about the 2000 Sci-Fi Channel original miniseries Frank Herbert's Dune. This is back when the Sci-Fi Channel was still Sci-Fi, not SyFy or whatever the hell it is now. And the reason I picked this to talk about is because I saw the trailer for this documentary coming out called, and like I said last week, I'm going to mispronounce it. It's called Yorodowski's Dune. I think that's how you pronounce it. And it's about the filmmaker Alejandro Yorodowski and how, or Jodorowsky, I don't know how you pronounce it, and how in the, I want to say 70s, early 80s, somewhere around there, he was working on this huge, like 11-hour big screen adaptation of Dune. It's going to be super weird and trippy and awesome. And it got me thinking about my favorite version of Dune, which was the miniseries. And really quick, just want to say the reason I prefer this version to say the David Lynch version is because there's yet to be a definitive David Lynch version of Dune. He made the 1984 film. It got taken away from him more than once, and so what we see is not what he intended. This film, however, is from what I can tell, is from what I remember from the book, is as accurate or as well an adaptation as you're gonna get, at least until somebody else comes along with a better idea. But I wanted to just talk about it because I don't think a lot of people talk about it. Sci-fi has a bad rap right now. A lot of the original movies they put out are horrible, but they're not actually Sci-Fi Channel original movies. So this is back when Sci-Fi was taking chances, and they had really big, interesting ideas they were exploring. But anyway, we'll go into what Mr. Non-Critic Will thought of Frank Herbert's Dune.
Well, for me, Frank Herbert's Dune. Actually, I remember when it first came out on Sci-Fi Channel when it was Sci-Fi, not SyFy, as you said before. When I first I attempted to watch it, 13 years ago? 13, 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was uninterested. I was in high school at the time. I think I had homework that night, and it just seemed so long and drawn out. It seemed boring at first, but 14 years later, non-critic Dustin preferred me to watch this movie, and I actually paid attention this time, and I actually did enjoy the miniseries. I mean, I did enjoy it. There's a lot of things in that movie that reminded me of other movies, like I would say like Star Wars, for instance. It had a lot of similarities with the movies, and I definitely am a fan of Star Wars. So, and then it's just an epic story in general. So when, like last show that we did, one of the shows prior, I said before that with me, just by chance, I see the sequel before I see the original, and I was more interested in what we will be talking about soon, Children of Dune. So I had to pretty much piece together how it all started. So everything now made sense for me. The movie, the miniseries, like I said, it was very epic story. Not trying to give any spoilers or anything like that, but I would recommend watching it. It is a little lengthy, but it's well worth it, and it tells a great story for me. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and in a lot of ways, Dune, the book, is sort of the Lord of the Rings of the sci-fi genre. I I think it's
Hmm.
certainly the book by which a lot of sci-fi books are judged. And now some people would debate me on that. They would say that the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov is really the sci-fi book by which all others are judged. But it depends on your definition of sci-fi. That's why I
Okay.
think it's interesting that you made the Star Wars connection. Well, it's not very hard; they're very similar. But to me, Dune is not, although it might have some concepts like this, it's not hard science fiction. It's more of a space opera, like Star Wars is. It's more about exploring the characters and the world and the mythology than it is about the science and the ideas. So
Hmm.
this book definitely had to have had some sort of influence on Star Wars. There's no way to escape that. I mean, the main character of Paul is very much like Luke Skywalker, except an
Hmm.
interesting parallel is Luke grows up on a desert planet and then goes into the galaxy to find his power. This is someone who lives on another planet, on Caladan, and is
Yes.
already familiar with the rest of the galaxy, but learns about his power on a desert planet. So I think that's
Hmm.
a pretty interesting parallel. But I first became aware of Dune when I was talking to my dad about that very thing. We were talking about originality in storytelling, and he was saying how it doesn't matter what your story is, it's what you do with the story that makes it original. And he brought up Star Wars and Dune. He said to him, Star Wars always reminded him of Dune, and so that's what piqued my interest for it. But um, you're right. It is an epic story, but it's not an overblown epic story. Say if you look at what's a good example of this? Something like the Star Wars prequels.
Hmm.
Those to me they are not epic films. They are one story stretched out into three films that really could have been told in one film.
Yes.
And there's epic action and there's epic visual effects and things like that. But the story itself is not epic. To me, what tells an epic story is when a character has an epic transition, and that's certainly what Paul goes through. As I
Yes.
stated last week, the what appeals to me so much about Dune, besides the characters, although they're great, is this is the very best example of the hero's journey. My goodness, what's wrong? The hero's journey that I've come across. The hero's journey is a very, very old story structure. Most successful stories, the ones that people remember, follow the hero's journey. And this, I think, is the most compelling because it has some of the more unique ideas, and when the hero achieves the goal he sets out to achieve, there is a sense that not everything is happily ever after, which
Yes.
which is very unique. Well, I say it's unique in modern storytelling. I remember when I first watched Dune, it reminded me. It felt like Hamlet. It felt like a Shakespeare play,
Hmm.
and it was a very political and whatnot. So that it does have a lot of classic story elements and a lot of mythological story elements to it. But for a modern story within the last 100 years, to have a hero who comes to be a hero the way Paul does is pretty unique, I think.
And I would definitely agree. Uh, the way, not trying to relate to Star Wars again, but it kind of felt like, well, for me, it kind of felt like Paul was the resemblance of Luke Skywalker when it comes to him becoming the hero that he is. You start the typical story. You start off innocent young man, young boy, not knowing much of the world, only where you're from, and then you end up going on this epic journey due to certain circumstances, certain situations, and you experience the darker side of things, and it makes you more defensive. It grows you up. but now you're not that innocent young boy that you used to be. You know, because you're now aware of the corruption, the deceit, betrayal. You know, so it makes you go thick skin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and which is what is needed in order to overcome. Cause it's pretty much a form of adapting or evolving. So,
Yeah,
so Paul, just like similarity with Star Wars, Paul's character, he he starts off just being um, innocent young man, not aware of much. Just he's part of royalty, and then a lot of tragedies happen around him, and with dealing with him and his family, that makes him have to go beyond the boundaries of his comfort and find a new find his new self in a sense. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. In the hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell used to write about it, and Joseph Campbell was the consultant for George Lucas when he was writing Star Wars, which is why I bring him up. He says that in the hero's journey you have the call to adventure, and that's when something happens that, just like I said, calls the hero to adventure, and you have that right away with Dune. You have Paul and his family have been given the planet Arrakis to see over, to govern over. Now, Arrakis is the heart of this empire because it's only on Arrakis where this resource called spice it can be found. So
yes,
if you control the spice, you control everything. And the spice can be anything if you want to make a modern day parallel to it. The spice can be gasoline. The spice can be any sort of natural resource that a society needs to thrive off. And
yes,
so they use it for food, they use it for any number of things. But so you have him being called to Arrakis, and he doesn't like it. That's the one thing the hero has to do. When he receives the call, he has to deny the call. Very much say it like the Matrix. There's the scene in the Matrix where they first tell him about that, and he doesn't want any part of it at first, and then he eventually takes the pill. But, so right away, you have a character you can identify with. Even though this world, I'll admit, when I first saw Dune, I had a lot of trouble getting into it because so much of it was just weird. Like right off the bat, you have the scene with the Bene Gesserit mother,
yeah.
and they're talking to each other in this weird voice, and you're like, what the hell? And he has to put his hand in the box, and you're like, what's happening?
I was surprised. I was weirded out about that too, actually.
Yeah. I've read the book since then, and so I understand what that scene is about. But at the time, I was so confused, but I kept watching because you have this character of Paul, this naive kid who has a lot of what he thinks is a lot of responsibility on his shoulder, denying this adventure, and then something happens where, and you know what, this isn't really spoiling it, but because they say right off the bat, someone's plotting to kill his father, the Baron Harkonnen, and so that happens. That's why it reminds me of Hamlet. So he can no longer deny this adventure. He's thrust into it. And then the hero has to go through what's called the Dark Descent, which is exactly what you're talking about. This series of trial and tribulations where they reach their darkest hour. That is the only way they can rise up and become a hero. And I think you don't have to follow that in storytelling, but the most satisfying stories do follow that. And I think whenever I see a movie that is going in that direction, and you can't pull the middle part off, then I'm just completely turned off by it. You know, if you want to, again, we'll make another comparison to Star Wars. You can look at that as The Empire Strikes Back as the Dark Descent. This is when Luke Skywalker is at his darkest hour, is in The Empire Strikes Back. It's when his friend is taken away and frozen into carbonite. He learns the truth about his father. He has his hand cut off, and then in Return of the Jedi, he comes back and he's ready to ascend into this sort of hero. Now that is a very easily consumable version of the hero's journey, which is why everybody loves it so much. But
Yeah.
in Dune, they have such strange concepts. The whole idea of the spice in general, and the Fremen characters that he goes to live with and becomes a part of, and eventually starts to lead. Their lifestyle, this sort of gypsy, hermity lifestyle they have is fascinating to watch, and you can really tell that someone who grew up in luxury on this planet of Caladan, where they had oceans and everything, to not only lose his father, but to all of a sudden be a nobody among this tribe that he doesn't fully understand, and have to become a part of them is very satisfying to watch when it finally starts to come to fruition. Now, enough about that. I want to know what you thought about, and you may not have thought about it, but what do you think of the movie visually? Because that a lot of people, I've read at least, a lot of people are sort of divided on the visuals.
Um. No, well, visually for me, I'd say for me it was visually stunning. There were, I mean, there was beautiful scenery. The technology that they have in that, because it's on a different planet or whatnot. The abilities that the people have, it was all very new and miraculous in a sense. So for me, it was visually stunning for me. But it did remind me of different similar movies that had the same type of visual effects. But it's still such as Star Wars. Yeah, still putting up Star Wars. That's the main one that I can think of as far as like the different worlds, the different places that he went to. It did remind me a lot of. Also, actually, there was a movie. I think it was Chronicles of Riddick, I believe, in that desert atmosphere or whatnot. The first Chronicles of Riddick, actually.
Pitch Black, or
oh wait, there was a movie where
there was Pitch Black, there was the Chronicles of Riddick, and then there was
yeah.
All of which were not very good movies, but
yeah. But as far as scenery, like the desert scenery, I remember a specific movie where once it got extremely hot, the sands would pretty much
glow.
It will blow you away, but it'll burn you. It'll kill you. I'm trying to think if that was
Sounds
also
like Pitch Black. It might be. I haven't seen Pitch Black in years.
And could have possibly been Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone, the original one, because I do remember he was on.
Right, yeah. There's a weird thing about that.
He was on a planet, a desert planet, and he was trying to escape. And I guess the person that was trying to help him decided to just end his life by going out into the sands in that storm. I think it was Judge Dredd, but it was something like that. So for me, like I said, the visual. Sorry. Well, the reason why the visual effects were good for me. They were stunning.
The reason I ask that is because they made. I mean, besides the fact that the CGI in it is extremely dated, it looks like PlayStation 1 every now and then. Some of the special effects, but the reason I bring it up is because there's a sort of hypnotic quality to Dune. Actually, the first few times I rented it, because I didn't watch it when it was on TV, I caught it a little bit, but it was too into it for me to really pay attention. So I would rent it. I rented it a couple times because there's something hypnotic about it that almost lulled me to sleep, and that might sound like a bad thing, but it was almost comforting. And
yes.
And even now while I was rewatching it, there's this comforting mesmerizing quality to the visuals. And I was watching an interview just before we came on here with John Harrison, the writer director, and he said that the DP, director of photography, he was working with, the reason he wanted to work with him is because of his lighting choices, and they do have some very very strange and interesting lighting choices in the film. There's a lot of cool use of greens and reds and
Yes.
and of
Yeah,
course
there is.
right, and of course blue because of the Fremen eyes and everything. But what I think is the most interesting, and I swear to you, I didn't notice it, and I don't want to see if you did. But a lot of the time, they film outside in the desert on a soundstage, and the background is painted. So a lot of the times you see them outside on Arrakis, and you see all those dunes, and they're really cool colors, but that's not CGI, and those aren't real dunes. They're on a soundstage, and it's almost like theater. Did you notice any of that?
I didn't notice that. No.
Which is really, really unique, and I think I wish more films would do that instead of taking the George Lucas route or say, I don't know, I want to say James Cameron, but that was an entirely artificial world where you have characters standing in front of a blue screen, then the environment's going to be filled in later. To have at least Peter Jackson does this a lot, where you have an element of the scene there. So you might have the immediate foreground and the midground, but the background is a blue screen. That's fine. But in this, to have the foreground be there, the midground be there, and the background be painted on, and you can manipulate it with lighting to create a more depth of frame, adds to that sort of hypnotic quality to it. I think because it is like watching a play, but it's also a movie. It's so that's filmmaking. I don't care if this was on TV. That is pure filmmaking. That is taking this blend of, just throwing a bunch of CG at you. And I'm not somebody who hates CG. There's a lot of people who hate it. I don't. But unless it's overused, like Mr. George Lucas does. But to have these practical effects with the CGI and with this sort of theater techniques and doing it all with lighting in camera, that's how you create an illusion, and film is an illusion. And I just, every time I watch the film, like you said, it's stunning. And you may not always know why. Like, I didn't know why it looked that way until I watched this making of, and I was blown away by that. I thought it was so interesting, as you can tell by me ranting about it for 20 minutes. Now, in terms of, we'll go back into the story in a bit, but other than Paul, I mean, obviously I guarantee you and I both could relate to Paul, but other than identifying with Paul and everything, were there any characters in it that really stood out to you that you thought sort of were memorable?
For me, surprisingly, his mother. I liked the mother's character because she stayed strong throughout the whole miniseries. She stayed a very strong pillar for her son, for her family, even after the fact that her husband was murdered. And then she even became, can't think of the word, but what in Dune, what did she became the mother of the Fremens or whatnot? Can you elaborate that?
I don't know the term, but I know what you mean. Because she was Bene Gesserit, which is their sort of their female holy order thing. And anyone watching this who has, which nobody will, but anyone watching this who's read Dune probably hates me for not remembering these, but so she was a Bene Gesserit, and she becomes sort of like this shaman amongst the Fremen.
And one thing that I really loved at the beginning with the mother was the fact that even though she was royalty, she didn't act like she was royalty. She still acted like she was, quote unquote, a commoner. So she treated everybody with respect and care and peace. When they went to can't think of the name of the place, when they went over there where the Fremens were servants, she immediately shut that down and said, "No, this is not happening anymore. They don't need to slave over us." Yeah, but there, yes, she pretty much had the attitude they don't need to slave over us, and I'm not going to have that. There's going to be new rules, and everybody's going to be treated equal. I don't want them to be our servants or slaves or anything like that. So I loved the fact how down to earth she was, and she wasn't acting like she wasn't the typical stuck up person of royalty. She actually cared for the people. So
I think part of that is probably because she, even though they call her the Lady Jessica and everything like that, the way their political system works, and I don't understand anything about politics in the real world, so in this make believe world, I'm not going to understand much. But I did get that she's not. She is the concubine of Duke Leto Atreides. She's not his wife, so she's not a duchess or anything like that. She's the mother of his child, but the reason he's not married is because the way their royal houses work, or the way the family houses work, is he has to be eligible in case one of the major houses, he marries someone from one of the major houses or something.
So it can be a treaty of peace,
right.
And she understood that, even though it of course, I'm pretty sure it hurt her. But she understood because she loved him so much, and she's not. If there's a way that they can gain peace with another family, then she'll let it happen. So I mean, that's a big sacrifice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. She was one of my favorite characters too, and that's one of my favorite aspects of the story, is that you can have the mother of a character be equally as important as the hero himself, and have her be such a complex character. At least she's in a very complex situation. And that's why I asked if there were any other characters that struck you, because I mean, I know it's based on a book, and books have much more time to elaborate on the layers of their characters as Dune does. But the fact that translated so well into the film as well is really, really intriguing. That practically any character in the movie that has a speaking part has some complexity to it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? There's no one is any one thing, and I guess the comparison I made to you when we were talking about it yesterday is probably the only thing around that I'm aware of right now. The only thing around that still has that is Game of Thrones.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm not a big Game of Thrones fan or anything, but from what I've seen of it and what I've read of the books, every character, they have a very clear-cut personality. They're fully formed, and they're all so complex, and they have so much going on. And it totally works in this miniseries. You don't get that a lot on television.
No, you don't.
It's even Paul himself is when he's conflicted over being the son of a duke. He's conflicted over living in Arrakis. He is trying to be this man. There's so much. It's so rich, and there's so much going on. And even the Cheney, the woman he falls in love with, she's got a lot going on. The leader of the Fremen has a lot going on. It's even Baron Harkonnen, who could easily be just the stereotypical bad guy, and I guess he is in a sense. There's this strange incestual homoeroticism going on with that guy that makes him like not only does he want power, and not only does he lust for power, but he sexually lusts after power, and he sees his nephew as the key to getting that power, and in a way he has this weird sexual desire for his nephew that's so bizarre. And
It's
and
so
weirdly,
nasty.
yeah, it is. I mean, it's again, that's there in the book, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the book, but I think it's a testament to how good this miniseries is that all of that still comes through.
Hmm.
It's mind blowing, really, because like I said, that's back when the Sci-Fi Channel took chances. Like that was shortly a few years before they rebooted Battlestar Galactica, and
Yes.
that's when they were doing a lot more miniseries. And now they're doing all these stupid ghost hunting shows and crap. And I look back at Dune and Children of Dune, and I'm like, I just wish the Sci-Fi Channel would do more stuff like this.
You know, not to get off topic about Doom, but Sci-Fi Channel in general, I agree with you. With back in the day, they did take more chances because excuse me, but the shit that we have now on Sci-Fi Channel, like those ghost hunting, all these ghost hunting TV shows, and then dumb, dumb shit like Sharknado, flying sharks, and like really, like you're not even trying no more. You're just trying to make a quick buck.
And they
And,
literally are too, because Sci-Fi did not make Sharknado. Sci-Fi did
mm,
not make Sharktopus. They did not make any of those movies that they say are Sci-Fi Channel original movies. They're made
mm,
by the Roger Corman Company, and they're made by this horrible studio called The Asylum. And they just basically buy the distribution rights from those companies, and they air it on the Sci-Fi Channel. So they have minimal investment in these movies, and then they throw them on their channel and slap Sci-Fi Channel original movie on top of it,
mm,
and that's ruining their brand. I think it's when you have some
it is.
I understand the appeal of Sharktopus and Sharknado, and it's silly, and I can understand why people would find it entertaining. But to me, making a film that's that intentionally bad is a waste of time.
Yes.
If they were trying to make a good movie, and we had the same discussion when we talked about The Room. If they were trying to make a good movie about a tornado that sucks up a bunch of sharks,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you would. But if they were trying to do that and it turned out horrible, that's one thing. But the fact that Sci-Fi Channel is giving distribution to these people and
Hmm.
who are intentionally making bad movies, and that when they're capable of producing something like Dune or Battlestar Galactica or even some of their other, like they used to have debate shows on the Sci-Fi Channel about science fiction and about big ideas and things, and now they're just content to show Haunted Collector and Ghost Hunters and all these other bullshit things that
Yeah.
not even
Bullshit. Yeah.
science fiction.
No. It's just pure bullshit.
Absolutely, and I just it makes me depressed every time. I mean, Sci-Fi still does have some pretty good shows on it. Like I like
Yes.
Warehouse 13, and I haven't seen Haven yet, but
Okay.
it's based on a Stephen King novella that I read and I enjoyed. So I
Didn't
mean,
they
there's
have like?
still hope out there in Eureka and everything. But what were we gonna
Didn't they
say?
have? Didn't they have? I think Merlin on Sci-Fi as well.
Well, they aired it on Sci-Fi. That was a was it B? It was either BBC or ITV, British
Okay.
channel. So it's
Oh,
an
okay.
import
Okay.
from Britain.
Okay.
But should do a whole show on the Sci-Fi Channel someday. But I mean, I feel bad because I there's a part of me that thinks, and I don't know where I'm getting this from, that not enough people are aware of this miniseries. Like when I mentioned it to you, I fully expected you to either have forgotten it or just not cared
Mhm.
whatsoever. And I feel like it's sort of I was I was surprised you hadn't forgotten about it. To be honest with
Um, the reason why I didn't forget about it is because I remember Children of Doom. Look, again, I I did actually see Dune before I saw Children of Dune, just that I paid attention to Children of Dune. And Children of Dune interest me. Back in the day, I used to be just mainly just full like action sequences, CG and everything. So I'm seeing characters teleport here and there while they're fighting. Their eyes are glowing blue. I was just like, oh, this looks pretty cool, and it got me interested in seeing that. I'm seeing the one of the main characters on Children of Doom like running, having super speed and everything. So I'm just like, oh, I gotta watch this. This seems really cool. So that's what caught my interest. That's what caught my eye. And once I actually seen the story, I was just like, this is actually. I mean, once I actually seen the miniseries, I'm like, this is an interesting story. So then it always made me question, why didn't I like Dune? Was it so because it didn't seem like it had as much action as Children of Dune. It didn't have as much flair, I guess, for me. But that's why I always remembered it, because I always had a feel for Children of Dune. So then when you told me, I want you to watch Dune, I was like, you know what? At first, I was just kind of like, I don't know. I didn't like it before, but I have a new mindset now, and also a better understanding of film. It's not just about the best angles for an action sequence. There's so much more. And first off, you need a great story to carry anything. So that's why I didn't forget. And that's why I liked it. And now I have a better understanding of Dune in general in its entirety, as far as the miniseries is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the miniseries, I mean, I used to work with a guy who was a big Frank Herbert fan, a big Dune fan. Mm-hmm. And I worked with him when Children of Dune came out, and I was really excited for it. And even he said that he was pretty happy with the miniseries, that it was, like I said, it was as close to an adaptation as you were going to get until, like I said, until somebody comes along. And I don't even know what you would do. Like, there was, a few years ago, there was talk of the guy who, his name, I can't think of it, but the guy who directed Hancock, he's also an actor, that he was going to direct a remake of Dune, like a big screen remake. And I just thought, well, what are you going to do? Like, what? I don't understand how you could really adapt the story better than this miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would you be interested in seeing another remake, maybe a big screen version of it?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I'll be interested in seeing another remake, or I would prefer maybe seeing another sequel. What happens after Children of Dune? I don't. I'd be more interested in seeing a sequel than seeing a remake.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I don't know why they didn't do more of these. Maybe Children of Dune wasn't as well received as they had hoped, but it seems to me like they had intended on doing more, because Frank Herbert, I don't know how many he wrote, but he wrote a bunch more after Children of Dune, and from what I've heard from people, after Children of Dune, the books kind of start to fall off in terms of quality. But it seemed to me, I got the feeling, and we can talk about it more tomorrow when we talk about Children of Dune, but I got the feeling that they fully intended on doing more of these.
Yes.
And I really wish they would. It's probably too late now. It's been 11 years since Children of Dune was on.
Yeah, Jesus.
Oh, and that's another thing I wanted to ask, and we can finish this up in a second, but I wanted to ask about what your opinion was on the Sandworms.
Oh, the Sandworms. The Sandworms were a pretty interesting touch. You okay?
Yeah, sorry. I inhaled this and then saliva and really.
The Sandworms were a pretty interesting touch. I wasn't. I wasn't in awe about it. I wasn't like, oh, this is amazing. I just was like, oh, this is a pretty nice touch. You know, the sandworms kind of reminded me of the movie Tremors, just that the sandworms in Dune are a lot fucking bigger, a lot bigger than the ones in Tremors. But the way they when they didn't so-called tame them, but they were able to ride them. They were able to follow their patterns and see how when they will try to strike by the movements that you do, because the sandworms, they all sense like your vibration. They sense vibration in the sand, and they'll come and they'll eat you because they're always fucking hungry. But they had a way where they can, in a sense, tame the sandworm and ride the sandworm to different locations. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I unlike you, was in awe of the sandworms. I don't know what it is about them, but every time they're on screen, I'm just transfixed. I think there's something almost mystical about the sandworms in a storytelling sense, even though what's really interesting is since the sandworms are the beings that produce the spice itself. It's not the planet, it's the worms. So even though from in an in-world perspective, the sandworms are sort of the center of the economics of this civilization, and that's important enough. But they sort of represent this mysticism that's inherent in Dune that is sort of indefinable. They're just these gigantic creatures that are sort of they represent what Arrakis is, I think. And they're wild, and like you said, they're untamable and they're powerful. And so when the scenes where they're trying to ride the sandworms reminds me of like a rite of passage you might read about in other cultures. Like, you know, some cultures might have your first kill as your rite of passage.
Yes.
And riding the worms is their right. That's how Paul proves himself as the Moabite. And
that makes sense. Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, I even like just looking at fan art of the sandworms, because I think in our society we think of worms as just these filthy, disgusting things that just crawl around and they're gross. But they're more important than that in our ecosystem. But to have they're just freakishly huge worms just kind of puts you in your place, I think.
Yes.
And that's something that if in science fiction, if you explore man's place in the world or in the universe as being practically minuscule, I am probably going to fall in love with that story. And Dune does that completely, because Dune is the first time I remember thinking about consciousness and thinking about how little we understand it on an instinctual level, and if you can expand consciousness, and the worms being a representation of that as well. It's so... I'm running out of words, adjectives to describe it, but I honestly feel Dune is it can expand your mind a bit.
Yes.
Which I cannot say that about practically anything in the Sci-Fi Channel anymore. It was nice that there was a time when there was something on of real merit that could expand your mind, and that's what Mr. Alejandro Jodorowsky. That's what appealed to him about Dune.
Yes.
He wanted to tell this very mind-expanding story. Maybe when that documentary comes out on video, we can talk about it. What were you gonna say?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, definitely, that would definitely be a topic that we can discuss.
All right. So, any last thoughts on Dune?
Last thoughts. I was surprised. I was surprised of how much that I'd like it. I was very surprised because I was even struggling to download it to watch. I was just like, I remember I did not pay attention to this series. Kind of sucked. But I got to do it for this critique and for the fans. So.
Our legions of 8 viewers.
Legions of 8. It'll multiply someday. Someday. But, yes, final thoughts was I was very surprised at how much I liked it. And now I actually it makes me appreciate Children of Dune more because now I know how everything ties in together. So that's my final thought.
All right, awesome. Well, Children of Dune is the topic of discussion for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And we'll probably say a lot of the same things. But, oh, well, that's fine with me. So until tomorrow, I guess, this is 2 Non-Critics. I am Non-Critic Dustin.
And I'm Non-Critic Will.
And one of these days, we'll get a sign-off. But until then, nope. So, see you. Bye.